when it comes to the feminine, a lot of times what people tell you and teach is like, she is the receptive part, the one that's in flow, the one that surrenders. Where I got hung up is the story I told myself from a very young age is that feminine was weak. And so I put on this mask of masculinity, even in a female body, that really only led me to burnout. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
Hello, you lovely soul. It is so amazing that you're here and that you're joining today's conversation. My guest today is Leslie Draffin, who's a menstrual cycle coach. And in this episode, she's teaching you how to live in tune with your cycle, how to develop a positive relationship with it, and how to learn to listen to your body. And if you're not part of my Miracle Morning yet, then join now. I'm holding every day in the morning at 7 a.m. Central European Time, a class where I'm giving you coaching input. We will meditate together. You get an amazing workbook with amazing coaching questions, and we'll do so many more things that help you to start the day with peace, gratitude, and just positive energy. And I wish you now a wonderful time listening to this episode. I hope you learned as much as I did. And yeah, let's get started. I am so grateful to have such an inspiring, powerful, and beautiful woman inside and out as a guest on my show today. Leslie, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Empowering Vibez.
Thank you for having me, Hannah. I'm so excited to be here.
For the listener, the viewer who doesn't know you yet, would you like to give us a short introduction about yourself, what you're doing, and what your life is currently looking like?
I would. So my name is Leslie Draffin. I am a former news anchor, very recently former. I just have left my job, turned menstrual cycle coach. I also call myself a feminine embodiment mentor. I'm a podcast host. And my mission right now is to help women and menstruators feel empowered by their menstrual cycle, take charge of their true authenticity by reaching into themselves and really understanding what it is to be innately feminine. I come from a place where I was on hormonal birth control for 16 years. And so I know the whole struggle of kind of silencing that part of ourselves. And so for me, the mission is really helping eradicate shame and fear around the cycle. But like I said, helping people step into the full empowerment that comes from being someone who lives cyclically.
Is this how you became a menstrual cycle coach, like through your own story, or how did this happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I came off of hormonal birth control in 2020. And I like to say now, I feel like I was always leading up to something like this because even as a little kid, I was always very interested in the taboo. Like I remember having just a very wildly vivid imagination as a kid. And my dad was a preacher, so I was raised in the Christian faith pretty strictly and very conservative. And I had my period early at like 11. My mom had a hysterectomy before I was born, so my sister and I were both adopted, actually. And so we didn't really ever experience anyone bleeding. And then growing up in the church where you're told that this is like the sin of Eve, and the reason that childbirth will be so painful is because Eve sinned. All of that is kind of ingrained into you mentally. And then I took hormonal birth control from 18 to 33, 34, and silenced that entire part of myself. And so when I started really having my own spiritual awakening in 2019, I felt this innate pull to be like, release birth control. Like you are silencing something that is so truly at its essence you. And you have to get that out of your body to be able to experience it. And so as I was learning about all of these different modalities, as my spiritual awakening was growing and I was really claiming the whole word witch and really feeling very pulled to be aligned with the moon, aligned with the earth, I decided I needed to go off of the pill. My husband was so supportive. He got a vasectomy. We do not have any kids. We're child-free by choice. But what happened is when I came off of the pill, all hell broke loose. I didn't get a bleed until I'd say eight months or so after I came off of the pill, which is actually pretty normal as far as the average length of time that it takes to get your bleed back. But I also had horrific mood swings. My libido went out the door. I had no sex drive at all. My hair fell out. I got cystic acne, and I got diagnosed with PCOS. And so in the year that followed, I spent all this money, all this time trying to heal myself. And then in 2021, as I was exploring ways to do my Dharma, which I feel is to be a teacher and a mentor, I really started understanding that what truly lit me up was talking about menstrual cycles, and even more so, what it really means to be in the feminine. And I know that that's because I was always so in my masculine. I needed the feminine. I needed the divine feminine. I needed to access those portions of myself to be open to receiving. And so in the last year and a half, I've gotten certified as a menstrual cycle coach, just left my job after taking an extended leave for mental health issues. And all of that is to say a very long-winded way that yes, my issues with my cycle led me to where I am. And I think my upbringing as a preacher's kid who's now deconstructed her faith led me to be the feminine embodiment mentor portion of it.
Beautiful. I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start.
I'm sure you do.
Start actually with the feminine energy, because I don't know if everybody listening or watching right now knows exactly what the feminine and the male energy stands for. And would you tell us a little bit more about that and what the feminine energy can help us with, like how we can embrace it more? And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for me, and the way that I explain it is the masculine energy, and especially the way we look at it when we talk about the menstrual cycle. Your masculine energy is very outward. It's very social. It's very do focused. Do, be. Hustle culture is an extreme example of the masculine. And when it comes to the feminine, a lot of times what people tell you and teach is like, she is the receptive part, the one that's in flow, the one that surrenders. Where I got hung up is the story I had told myself from a very young age is that feminine was weak. And I know that I saw that in my own family play out and in the church play out and the meekness and the submissiveness and honestly the bullshit that I had witnessed for so long. And so I put on this mask of masculinity, even in a female body, that really only led me to burnout. Like, I know that now. So when you're thinking of having to do all your to-do lists and being so overrun with busyness and all of the things you have to do and that you quote unquote should be doing, that is where I feel like masculine energy lives. And so the way I talk about feminine energy is from an empowered place of, I love to kind of equate it with dark goddess energy, where you are empowered, you are standing in your, ferocity, very much Kali Ma, very much Hecate. And for those who may be listening and don't know who those are goddesses who are more stereotypically seen as more of the destruction. But think of Mother Nature and how the death and rebirth cycle has to be. So for me, that's what femininity is. It's feeling powerful in your own ability to create, to nurture, to relax, kind of watch from the maybe above all the people who are doing all the things below. And while I haven't really resonated with the idea of the slow, the more like Aphrodite leisure goddess thing, that's also another part of femininity. So that's what I'm working on for myself. And that's kind of my thing. It's like, I don't have it 100% right. And I will never, and no one really ever will. And if they tell you that they do, then run the other way. So it's a constant game within myself to check to see where I am in my masculine and figure out if I can get it more to a 50-50 balance, because that's really what we're trying to do. Everyone has masculine energy. Everyone has feminine energy, no matter the gender. And it's when those things are really playing perfectly in a 50-50-ish yin yang sync that we can feel our most alive self. Because if we're so in the passive and we're so in the feminine, we won't get things done. But when we're so in the masculine, we burn out.
We have a lot of similarities in our history, and I'm sure like lots of people, especially women watching, have the same, because we live in a very male society, and like it's almost like embracing this hustle culture, and there's like being busy is almost has almost like a sense of pride with it. And I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like this is something that we need to change on a culture level. And how it
Hmm.
happens, in my opinion, is by everybody starts by themselves. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Hmm. Yeah.
How can we live more in tune with our cycle? Can we embrace our cycle, or how can our cycle even help us to with certain
Hmm.
things, like with like the side where we have to get going, or the side where we need to like slow down a little bit, and so on? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Mm. Yeah. This answer is going to be so long. So the thing that I love
That's
about
amazing.
menstrual cycles, and you kind of, yeah, so you kind of already started on the conversation when you're talking about like when we talked about the masculine hustle culture. So the world is set up for male hormones, and that can be seen in the day-to-day 9 to 5 grind, because male hormones fluctuate on a 24-hour cycle. They go up, they go down very predictably, like the sun. But those in female bodies who have menstrual cycles are very much like the moon. And so the first thing I say, if you want to get in touch with your menstrual cycle, you got to start paying attention to the moon. You want to start moon bathing. You want to start moon gazing. And if you don't know what moon bathing is, it literally just means sitting outside in the moonlight. Moon gazing is looking at the moon. When I had my spiritual awakening in 2019, it was January, it was the wolf moon, it was a super moon. And I was standing underneath the moonlight in Austin, Texas. And I felt the moon like vibrating my chest and all the way down to my yoni, which is the word that I use for vulva, vaginal canal, up to cervix. It's a Sanskrit word for sacred portal. I could feel it like vibrating my entire body. And so if you want to get more in alignment with your cycle, I would say the first thing to do is start paying attention to where the moon is. Now, when we look at menstrual cycles, and like I said, the sun is very much like male hormones. The moon is like our female hormones because it waxes and it wanes along a much longer cycle, right? 29 and a half days or something, I think, is the lunar cycle. And so with someone in a feminine body who has a cycle, you want to start first reframing your idea about things like consistency, around things like stability, around things like predictability, right? Because the world tells us, oh, if you're not the same day after day after day after day, then you are less than. But the truth of the matter is, those in cyclical bodies, we are consistent. We are stable, but our timeline for those things is much longer than 24 hours. So, what I love about syncing with the cycle is that when you start to do things like track your cycle and you understand the phases of your cycle, because there are 4 phases, when you start getting data points down on a cycle tracker or your notepad or your journal, you will start proving to yourself, I am consistent. I am stable. Here are the days when I feel on fire. Here are the days when I need more rest. Here are the days when I have more challenges. And so when we start to look at it more broadly, that is when we can really start doing things like accessing our highest potential for productivity, for prosperity and abundance, right? Because we'll know which days we're going to be working more with the masculine yang energy and which days we're going to work more with the feminine yin energy and be more inward and do the things that, are a bit more reflective. And that's kind of the baseline. Like there's way more that you can talk about, but that's kind of, I guess, how I would answer that question, right? Start with the moon and then start tracking your cycle.
Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. How does stress, exercise, the way we nourish our body, how does that affect our cycle?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked this. Okay. So like I was saying, you have 4 phases in your menstrual cycle. So you've got the menstrual phase, right? When you have your period, that's what I refer to as inner winter. Then you have your follicular phase, inner spring, ovulation, inner summer, and luteal, which is inner fall. And so a lot of folks only think that their menstrual cycle is the day they bleed. That's not true. Your menstrual cycle is the first day of your period all the way until the day before your next period. So you often don't know how long your cycle is until, you started your period. So then you'd look one day in reverse and you think, okay, my cycle was 30 days long. So when it comes to the foods we eat and the way we exercise and also the way we do self-care, each phase of the cycle has different hormone elevations, ebbs, and flows. So inner spring and inner summer, which usually last between 7 and 10 days and 3 and 5 days. So altogether, you're looking at 10 to 15 days total. That is when your energy is rising. Your hormones are rising. You feel very fresh. You feel very energized. And that's a time of the month when you would want to eat very fresh foods. You would eat foods that you would naturally eat in spring and summer, right? Things that would be ripening at that point. And with exercise during those two phases, you have a lot of energy, right? So you can do things like higher intensity level cardio. You can do things like boot camp classes, brand new things. It's an excellent time for learning new things. But on the flip side of that, after you pass over ovulation and you get into inner fall, which lasts between 10 and 14 days, your energy levels are going to start to go back down. Progesterone is the only hormone that will be rising during that phase, but it's a very calming hormone. And what happens is if you do the same things that you were doing in spring and summer, and you have, let's say, health and fitness goals, the high intensity cardio, if you do that in inner fall, it will backfire. The eating super fresh, raw foods in inner fall, it'll also backfire. And that's because you need different things nutritionally when you are about to bleed. When Elisa Vitti talks about this, she's a hormone expert here in the States, and she's fantastic. Her books are the best, Woman Code and In the Flow. She talks about the fact that in the second half of your cycle, so that would be after ovulation and up until you bleed, if you are dieting, if you are over exercising, and if you are not taking care of yourself when it comes to stress, you will turn on muscle wasting and turn on fat storage. So let's think of it like a hamster wheel, right? Like if you see the hamster in the beginning, he's like going real good. Like, this is awesome. Yay, we love this. We're doing great. But the second he gets to the top of that wheel and he gets flipped around and then he can't get off of the damn thing, that's how it looks when you talk about the menstrual cycle with every single diet and exercise fad out there today. If you do the same thing over and over again every day, aka work like you have male hormones, you will not reach the health and fitness goals. You will likely lose a little weight in the first 2 weeks of your cycle and gain it all back in the second 2. So you've completely plateaued. And your motivation is going to be so much less and sort of deprived by just that one piece of knowledge. So in the second half of your cycle, you're going to eat more. 250 calories on average a day, you need more after you ovulate, when you've got progesterone pumping through your body and you're about to bleed. And when I talk about eating more, I'm talking about grounding foods, root vegetables, sweet potatoes, more complex carbs. You really need those in the second half of your cycle. And then the other thing as far as exercise goes is you want to do things that feel gentle on your body, but also help you work out some of that pent up energy that might still be inside. So let's say you've got mood swings or you have, just you need a stress reliever or something like a long walk, hiking in the woods, perfect. Pilates class, perfect. Things that are lower intensity. You can still lift weights, but maybe you lower the weight, right? And that's just really important because, like I was saying, the second half of your cycle, if you do the same thing you did in the first half, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. And then finally, when you are bleeding, I tell my clients, don't do anything. Take a walk. Great. Take a nap. Great. If you need to rest and your body says, I need to rest, you have to start listening to it. Because the thing is, we are so often as women told not to trust our bodies. We're told that our bodies aren't safe and that they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But the truth of the matter is you do know what you need. And so if you start to foster the relationship with yourself by doing things like listening when it says you need to rest, then you will be able to foster a relationship with the body you're going to be in until the day you die, till you leave this plane, right? And so I feel like That's truly what cycle syncing and cyclical living is all about. It's reestablishing and developing a relationship with a body that the whole entire outside world tells you not to trust. But innately, we really can remember those parts of ourselves. And when we do, that's when we can step into our power.
This is so important that you're sharing this. Thank you so much. I think this is so needed that women know this better, because I think so many people feel like they're failures because they can't stick to that in a diet, or because they're sticking to the diet, but they're not losing the weight, or because they don't have the energy. Maybe they're working out for 2 weeks, but then on week 3, they feel weak or whatever. And I feel it's so important to understand that our bodies are just different than male bodies. So thank you so much for sharing this.
Absolutely. And I feel like the other thing that we need to talk about is, well, one more thing I was going to say is when you're reaching health and fitness goals, you know how you have to do, like, a lot of times you'll do daily or weekly check-ins. I used to have, I've paid thousands of dollars to online and like online trainers, personal trainers, all of that shit. And I remember having to do these weekly check-ins where I would weigh myself and being so depressed when the weight wasn't budging. And I was not aligned with my cycle when I did those, when I was training with those people. But now when I look back and I think, well, of course, because your body is so different week to week to week. Of course, you weren't seeing the progress that you thought you should. And you also weren't aligning with your cycle. So truly, yes, like you were saying, like thinking that you are the same every day, even week to week, we really have to start looking month to month when it comes to menstrual cycles.
So what would your advice be if we have certain health or fitness goals? Like, how should we then approach this best?
So it really gets into the nitty gritty here a little bit, but in general, overall, I think the best thing to do is stop over exercising and stop dieting if you have a menstrual cycle. If you have any menstrual cycle problem, that looks like irregular cycles, missing cycles, acne, hair loss, PCOS, anything that's making your cycle become problematic, you really need to start looking at how much you're eating. Because the truth of the matter is that you're probably not eating enough. And so if you want to have the healthiest cycle, that's where we have to think about that. Now, this isn't really a conversation about diet culture, but I'll throw this in because I'm very anti-diet. I come from 20 years of a very major eating disorder. And so when I stopped dieting last year, one of the things that, and I mean, I totally stopped. I stopped tracking anything. I do not weigh myself. I don't let the doctor weigh me, any of that shit. So when I stopped that, one of the things I had to start understanding was food is so much more than what we give it credit for. Oftentimes we think of it as good and bad, and food is not neither of those things, right? Food is food. All food has nutrition. Some has more, some has less. And so when it comes to health and fitness goals, when I work with clients, and I will say this again, I never encourage dieting. I never encourage over exercising. And I don't usually work with people who are in that tract or that frame of mind. But I say, listen to what your body really feels like it wants. Let's say you're in inner spring and it really wants a fruit salad. Perfect. It's telling you that that's what it needs and that it's what it wants. If it says it wants chocolate in the week before your period, it probably means you have a magnesium deficiency, because chocolate has magnesium in it, and oftentimes we'll crave what we actually need inside our bodies. But I think you absolutely can reach health and fitness goals by syncing your cycle and your exercise and your food. By listening to what your body really says that it wants. And also, though, I'll throw in by reframing what those goals are. Why do you feel like you need to have those goals? Do you have, let's say I have a friend who is, who's a coach, and she's working to be a bodybuilder right now. So she has very distinct goals and that's how she wants it. But are those things in your head, society telling you that you need to look a certain way? And that's part of, I think, a lot of the work that I do is, where are the beliefs that you have coming from? Are they true to you? Are they something someone else told you? And are they doing you any good? So kind of answer the question, but
But it is like the problem itself is never the problem. And I feel like whatever we're
No.
struggling with is just showing us like, okay, this is where you still need to heal. And I find it
Mm-hmm.
very, very important that you're saying this, that actually, if we're struggling with our bodies, our weight, and so on, like I have also a very similar story to yours. And I didn't have my cycle for 10 years
Mm-hmm.
because I was so undernourished and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought I'm healthy, but actually, like
Mm-hmm.
our cycle shows us the most if we're healthy or not. So I think this is a very,
Yes.
very important conversation. And I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty a lot about that. For somebody
Yes.
listening
I
who's
love it.
also kind of like struggling with his body or kind of like still in this male process of like reading on the internet what to do or getting coaches that tell them what to do and
Mm-hmm.
so on. How can we nourish almost and this relationship with our body? How can we learn to really trust our body and so on? Do you have tips on how we can improve the relationship with our body?
So what I like to tell everyone is start a little journaling practice. So I teach this as part of cycle tracking, but it starts very simply by every single day checking in with yourself and asking, what do I need physically? What do I need mentally? What do I need emotionally? What do I need spiritually? How can I nourish myself today? What would I complain about to a friend? And what's going great? And that takes little to no time. But you'll be surprised. If you've never checked in with yourself, you will start hearing things like, oh, I'm fine. Like, whatever. Like I never let my clients use the word fine because it's not a descriptor that we like to like, yes, and you're fine. And what else? So start by checking in. And if you find that that's really hard, then I suggest practicing a little bit of breath work, a little bit of meditation. I'm also a certified meditation teacher. And it can really just look like deep breathing into the belly, 3 to 5 really good breaths, getting quiet and really saying to yourself, what do I need? Like what would feel good today? How can I nourish myself? What is something that's bothering me? And what's something that I'm really excited about, right? So just doing that type of a practice every single day, you could do it morning and night, which would be fantastic because then you can kind of have the check-in after you've had your day. That will be what I believe starts the conversation with yourself. Because when we look at cycle tracking and we look at living in a feminine body, it is a conversation that we have to learn to have. And if you've never heard that person before, it's like they're speaking another language. So as we start to tune into ourselves, we will start to understand how that other person is speaking. And so meditation is great. If you have a womb, I really love womb massage. I work a lot with yoni eggs and crystal pleasure wands in order to really connect with the womb space in the yoni. But just getting quiet and asking yourself those questions and being honest with yourself, because nobody's reading what you say, what you write. And honestly, if you're lying to yourself mentally, your body already knows. So being patient, understanding, like I said, that it's a conversation you have to learn to have, but just going ahead and starting. A lot of folks feel like the task is very big. And what I'm telling you is, babe, it does not have to be. It can be 2 minutes in the morning and a minute at night. That's it, just to start the conversation. And I feel like when you do that, you'll start wanting to talk more. It's like a new friend. Like you won't want to spend a ton of time with that person at the beginning because maybe it's a little bit awkward still. But by the time you're really getting the conversation going, you don't want it to ever end.
And isn't the relationship with ourselves the most important one? And yet we're still like so often spending so little time with it.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Is it normal to have PMS symptoms? Or is this kind of
No.
like a sign that something is off in the body?
So PMS is common, but not normal. And what I mean by that is a lot of people have PMS, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy or commonplace, normal, right? So doctors will tell you, oh, it's just normal. You have to get over it, get used to it, shit like that. And so will society, and so will your parents, and so will the verbiage of what kids learn in school about periods specifically. I remember, oh, you're going to have a period. It's going to be super painful and it's going to suck. And you're going to have it your whole life until you don't. And then that means you're old. Like that was like what we were told. But the truth of the matter is pain is not normal, right? Isn't that funny? Like pain is not normal. Mood swings, not normal. Acne, not normal. So no, PMS is absolutely not normal. What I refer to as PMS, I like to call cycle signs, because I feel like every single thing is a sign pointing back to something else, right? And I think we kind of already said this before. So no, it's not normal. And I'm really very adamant about that, because with just a couple little quick reframes or diet and lifestyle changes, you might be able to drastically impact how you feel each month, right? I mean, there are absolutely things that are massive hormonal imbalances and endocrine disrupting issues, things like PCOS, things like endometriosis, that I think we understand and know aren't quote unquote normal, right? Like how cramps might be seen as quote unquote normal. But I think no matter what, if you do start living more in sync with your cycle, you can help alleviate those things. But I really think that one of the things we have to start by doing is reevaluating and reframing how we think about our cycle. If we're out there thinking this sucks, I have to have this every day, every month until I'm old, this is bullshit, then it's going to be bullshit, because that's what we were already telling ourselves. But if we reframe our mindset around our menstrual cycle and we start to think, this is so exciting. When I bleed, I love when I bleed. Let me tell you, because I am going to watch my favorite TV show. I'm going to wear comfy ass clothes. I'm going to eat dark chocolate, and I'm going to take a bunch of baths. Like that's fun. That's like a full 4 days of self-care. And so when you look at it that way versus thinking about, oh, this is something I have to, just gross. Let me hide this. Let me just like muddle through. Of course it's going to be crappy. So just changing your mindset around your menstrual cycle.
And this is why in conversations like this and your job is so important, because I feel like it needs those leaders who go first and to kind of like maybe give us the permission to give ourselves the permission to see it that way. So that's why I think your work is so important, and I truly, truly appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I love to call myself a permissionary.
Oh, nice. That's a nice thing. Wonderful. Like truly, because I think it does take vulnerability and also a lot of courage to talk about the topics that are kind of like maybe a little bit taboo or like not so talked about. And actually, if you start to just talk with friends or like even now this conversation, like so many women suffer with hormonal imbalances, problems with their body, and so on. And it's actually, once you start opening up, others start to open up as well. And truly, almost everybody struggles with things like that. And I feel like our health is just the most important asset. And therefore, it's so important to like bring awareness to all these things.
Absolutely.
What are the most common questions that you're getting asked that we didn't touch yet? And of course, what are the answers to them?
Let me think. A lot of people ask about how to start tracking their cycle, but we've already talked about that, right? I say start by asking yourself those questions. Don't worry about where you are in your menstrual cycle. And then if you start asking and answering those questions every single day, the next time you have your period, then you know, oh, that's day 1 of my cycle. Then you can start adding those days. So day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however long your cycle is. And after you get 3 to 4 months of data where you're looking back at those journal questions, looking at your answers, and then looking at where you are in your cycle, that helps you uncover your unique cycle blueprint. And so what I mean by that is the plan, the outline of where you can then look and say, this is going to be a great day. It's month after month, a great time for me. So this is when I'm going to plan this. This is a time when I'm going to be pretty challenged. Maybe my mood's going to be a little bit lower. I do this instead. The question about PMS, people ask me all the time. Let me think what other ones. It's usually questions like PCOS related questions, because I had PCOS. I believe what I had was known as post-pill PCOS, which was brought on by all of those years on the hormonal birth control pill. And the other question I get all the time is, how do I come off of birth control? And I'm like, with some help, hopefully. But But yeah, a lot of those questions, I have some instant access masterclasses that I have already recorded that folks can find on my Instagram, and you can go learn how to track your cycle. You can go learn about how to quit hormonal birth control. I'm doing one on period pain. So I have a ton of freebies out there to help answer those major questions. But I'll tell you, I feel like the question I wish more people asked me was, you know, how can I live more aligned and more alive? Like, I think if you would come at it as that question, then I could always answer by sticking with your menstrual cycle. Because I feel like it's still, like you were saying, it is taboo. It is something that we're so hammered into from like the youngest of ages that it's not a big deal, when it's the biggest deal, truly, because it's what makes us us. And so I feel like I wish more people were asking that question to me, right? Because I would just, maybe they don't ask because they already know the answer is going to be your menstrual cycle, baby. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I would say.
Well, and it's also the beauty that makes us different from males, you know? It's, I feel like the last, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, the role of a woman switched so much, because it used to be, you know, like, so the house, like the mother, the housewife, that was embraced back in the days. And nowadays it's almost like that we're, as women, and I am speaking a lot for myself here, we're trying to like kind of like squeeze ourselves into the role of being like a male machine almost. And it starts with school, that every day at 8 o'clock, you got to be there. You got to show up Monday to Friday. Like for me, it was even Monday to Saturday and so on. No matter how you feel, like the school system, blah, blah, blah. Like everything is just made for that. And therefore, like naturally, we're conditioned to that. And I feel like we need such a big society shift, because like you see the number of depression, anxiety, all these things that are coming up because people are just trying to squeeze themselves into a system that doesn't work for us. So that's the reason why I do this
100%.
podcast. That's the reason why I do my job. Like,
yeah, no, I think I think absolutely for that too. As far as the trying to fit yourself into the male-dominated world, I think you hit it right, the nail right on the head, right? So as much of a feminist as I am, I really wholeheartedly feel that the birth control pill and the feminist movement at the same time did a number on us connecting with our true innate feminine cycles, because we were like, we have to shut this down. We have to be able to get in the workplace. We have to get equal pay, all of which is fucking true. But what it also did is it made us silence this part of ourselves and alienate it and ignore it. So of course we have seen a rise in menstrual cycle problems in the last 3 decades. Of course we have seen a rise in certain parts of the world where there are more menstrual cycle issues, more menopause issues in certain places in the world than there are in others. There are places in the world where they don't have menopausal issues because they revere their elderly. Here in the United States, there's massive issues with menopause. Like the number one surgery is hysterectomies. So yes, of course, it is all of that pressure that we are putting on ourselves and that society puts on us that has made us become completely unmoored, dismembered from our bodies and from our cycle itself.
And it all starts in a very young age, because truly, like, I think I got on the pill when I was 14, and nobody told me anything about like the whole, like, what it could cause. And it was, and like some like even have like in their teens acne, and then they get prescribed the pill. And like truly due to my hormone, like also due to my birth control, as I mentioned before, 10 years without my cycle. It took like, I went off of it, and it took 10 years till I had a cycle. That is like really showing how big the effect is of these little pills that we're taking every day.
Yeah. And the problem that I feel like with the pill is that like people don't really know, like if you do the research, people don't really know how it works. And I don't mean people like us who aren't, medical professionals. I mean like The medical professionals and the people who make the pills are like, well, they probably work either this way or this way, but we know they work. And it's like, they know they work. It's the how that gets a little fuzzy. And for me, when I started doing that research, I was like, are you kidding me? I put this in my body for 16 years, never asked a question. Oh, I'm not going to have a period. Great. I'm not going to get pregnant. Even better. But now that I know, first of all, how problematic the studies and case studies were around the pill, and secondly, how like little information and study has been done recently on what the effects are. Like, we haven't really been studying the pill after we studied it and got it on the market and washed the hands of it. It's not really been studied again. And the massive amounts of issues that women have on the pill, if it was a pill that a man was taking, that's why we don't have male hormonal birth control, because they had headaches and they gained weight. Poor babies. Like, come the fuck on. Like, that shit has been going on with women since day one. People have died, and we still are not looking back into this. So I really feel like if you're someone who is on the pill and you're using it for pregnancy prevention, I'm never going to be someone who's like against the pill, because I needed it for pregnancy prevention. And I'm so glad that I had that option. And I live here in the States where our rights as women are being are in jeopardy. So I'm never going to say don't take the pill. I'm just going to say understand what's happening. Understand how it works.
Thank you for sharing.
And if you're still fine with that, right? Like, if you're still fine with that, I'm fine with that for you. The second that you want to come off the pill and you want to learn other options, there are so many people out there who will support you. That is not your only option, no matter what a doctor tells you. It's not your only option to manage your PCOS, your endometriosis, any of those issues. There's other ways to keep yourself from getting pregnant. There are people out that can help you. But I'm also, like I said, very pro pill. I'm just also very pro education.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Like, any choice is perfectly fine, but it should be an educated choice.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm only speaking for myself. It wasn't. It was truly like, that's what the doctor says. Okay, I'll do it.
Yep.
And there's so much trust in the doctors, but then actually sometimes there's not even the education back there. So yeah, very, very important topic. And at the same time, like a very controversial topic and a very emotional one as well, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. It is emotional. And I think that, part of the emotion around it is the fact that, like I said before, we're told by all of these people who are so trained that the pain you feel is normal. You just got to get over it. Or it's in your head. The mood swings. Oh my gosh. When I discovered how much depression and anxiety is related to hormonal birth control use and how depressed and anxious I was throughout my 20s, I cannot get my head around the fact that that's something that doctors would say, oh, that's just in your head. It can't be related to the pill. It absolutely can be. And so for me, that's the other issue, is just the gaslighting that can happen even when you are trying to be an informed person. When you have these people who are these highly trained people saying that, what you think isn't true. And so I think that's really where it goes back to really having that relationship with yourself and understanding how your body really is and what it needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would like to touch on another topic that is very close to my heart. I would like to talk about mental health, because you struggled with kind of burnout, anxiety, and depression throughout the last year. Would you like to share a bit more about that and what you went through, and maybe also what has helped you so far?
Absolutely. So, like I was saying at the beginning, I recently resigned from my position as a news anchor. I anchored for about 15 years, and the last 2.5 for the pandemic have been hell. But my burnout really did not start until November of last year, 2021. And I was really surprised by how burnt out I was getting. And when I talked to my therapist and other therapists, because I was still working at that time and I was doing news stories on people's burnout, what was fascinating is when we look at the pandemic, the first year or so, people were in such fight or flight that they didn't have the freeze that comes with anxiety and burnout, right? We were just trying to muscle our way through, get through that shit. And then it made sense that like last year and early this year, we saw a ton of people have burnout. We saw the great resignation. We saw things like quiet quitting. And for me, it started manifesting in ways like, I'm trying to think now. I've been on mental health leave for several months. And so it's thankfully my anxiety is much lessened, but it would manifest in things like not being able to sleep, racing thoughts, like definitely worst case scenario type things, insane fatigue, worry all the time. That was how the anxiety would manifest. I was also diagnosed with PTSD, and I thought that was so strange until I started really looking at what the news industry is and does. And I would have to report on people's worst days of their life and ask people to share with me the worst things that have ever happened to them. And I'm looking at things behind the scenes that you guys never see, right? Hope you don't see it. And then I have to be the voice to tell it in an unbiased way and not lose my shit and cry on TV. So when I started to cry more often in the middle of the newscasts, it happened earlier this year. And then in the summer in June, we had a horrible school shooting where like, I think 19 elementary kids were killed and their 2 teachers. And I just cried. I cried on the news, and I'm like, I couldn't get my shit together. I couldn't pull it back together. That's when I really realized I have got to take a break. And so I deleted every news app. I stopped following every news app. I was really fortunate that my company had medical leave set aside that I could take, and I qualified for short-term disability, so I was able to get a paycheck as well. But I completely checked out. I completely checked out. And for the first month, I was still insanely anxious. Like, I was so worried about if everything was going to get approved. And then the second month, I was a little less worried about that. And then throw on some grief. We had 2 of our 3 dogs pass away this summer within 6 weeks of each other. Very suddenly, very, very surprisingly. So throw some grief on top of that mental shit. And then the last couple of weeks, when I finally decided to just not go back to news, it's like this peace has come over me. Like, I feel like I've jumped timelines in the past 3 months. If we've like, when we talk about that type of thing, like, I don't remember who she was. I really don't remember what, and my face doesn't look the same. Like, I don't remember who that person was. I'm sleeping better. I'm able to enjoy life more. I mean, it's just wild. It's one of those things where, I mean, I've been prescribed anxiety medication for years, antidepressants. I was on those too. And it's really just been the last couple of months completely checking out of the things that brought me anxiety. The problem for me is that was what was paying my bills, right? Like I couldn't check out beforehand. And so now it's just so interesting. We're recording this on the day I actually resigned. So I'm like, we'll see where it goes, right? Like, I feel really good about it. But what I will say about mental health and menstrual health is that when you start to do the cycle tracking, like I was saying, and you uncover that blueprint of yours, you will then be able to pinpoint the days when you feel really shitty. And then you can look at yourself and say, okay, look, I know it doesn't last. I know this is a fluke. I know this is a challenge I have to, get through on day blank of my cycle. It happens month to month. And then by 5 days from then, I feel great, right? So you can give yourself more grace. But also I feel like the thing about mental health that I just feel like more people need to talk about it is that it needs to be like the menstrual cycle, really more shared. Like, we have to talk about it. We have to start breaking the taboo around talking about our mental health. I posted when I went on medical leave, I did this big post, and if you guys can follow me on Facebook, my professional Facebook page, Leslie Draffin, you'll see the post. It'll still be there. And I broke it down. I was like, here's what's happening. I was very explicit about what's going on. And it was extremely well received. And so what I have found in my own experience, and I totally understand that this is not everyone's experience. I have so much privilege as a thin, white woman who is culturally pretty, right? So like all those things are privilege for me. It was accepted with like open arms. People were so excited that I was being open about this shit, but that's not the case for all people. If I did not look the way I look, I guarantee it wouldn't have been receptive the way it was received. So I really just feel like being open and letting everyone be so truly authentically themselves is so vastly important when we talk about mental health, when we talk about things like diet culture, when we talk about menstrual health, when we talk about just life in general. And if there's one thing I've learned in the past year since really embracing the menstrual cycle coaching online, really embracing living authentically online, it's basically that putting your own truth out there and letting your own light shine is the fastest way to feel happier. Truly. As scary as it is, it's the fastest way to inner peace. It's the fastest way to happiness and joy.
Absolutely.
But maybe you need support,
Absolutely.
right? Like you might need a community to help you.
Yeah, or somebody to talk to and who can help you sort out what you truly want in your life and what are the aspects that you want to let go, just like your job, and like what are the images and the energies that affect my mental health and that I cannot take, because truly, like, I really understand you very well, because I stopped watching the news, I think probably like 10 years ago. And I started a little bit during when the pandemic hit, because you kind of needed to know, am I allowed to go out? What am I allowed to do? And I remember still, like, it was haunting me when I closed my eyes, when I went to bed, those pictures of people in the hospital and so on. And I could cry right now about it because it touched me on such a deep level. And I feel there are those things where those touch you or that bring you in rage, like animal cruelty or stuff like that, that get you into your power to do something against it and to like stand up for it. But then there are these things where you see images and so on, where you feel just like helpless and just like it drains your energy. And those are the things that we need to like be aware of and let go. So I'm so proud of you that you made this decision. I can see how you're lighting up in what you're talking about. So I'm 100% sure that this is your path and that you'd made the right decision. And it's beautiful to see you smile again. And I also truly appreciate your vulnerability about this topic, because as I said, and before we started rolling, I myself struggled with depression last year, and I didn't leave the house. I was so ashamed of it. I completely like checked out everywhere and so on, and I have such a supportive network. I have the most amazing husband. I have a friend since my childhood. My parents were supporting me and so on. And still I felt I am wrong. And it was truly like taking 1 to 1.5 years of my life, because I was so ashamed by how I was feeling. And that's why I want to open up these conversations more, because if somebody listening right now, like, you are not alone and you can seek help. And the more you open up, others will open up, and that creates closeness. And that will exactly this lonely feeling that you might feel right now can vanish within minutes. And therefore, Leslie, I really, really appreciate you sharing your story, especially because you're still in the process. And then it's always harder, I feel, to share something as compared to once you're over it and kind of learned all the lessons of it. So thank you so much for your vulnerability and honesty. It's truly appreciated.
Of course, it is my pleasure.
Well, it was a beautiful conversation. I want to thank you so much for your time, for all the wisdom that you shared with us. You definitely got me interested in a topic that I was also not so interested until now. So, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. You are truly a blessing to the world, and keep shining your light, because the world truly needs it.
Thanks, Hannah.
Now, I would like to know from you, what was your biggest takeaway and how can you put it into action starting now? Leave a comment below or hop over to Instagram @HannahWiz and leave a comment on the post of today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and never forget to shine your light.